When we talk about innovation in the tech world, smartphones, consumer tech, a lot of people say innovation has stalled. And then every now and then, we have a disruptor that comes in and genuinely innovates. That company happens to be Nothing. Literally, that's the company's name. And the man behind Nothing, an absolute genius, entrepreneur, the man, the myth, the legend, Carl Pei is with me on Tech Today. Carl, what a pleasure to have you on the show.
Great to be here.
Carl, welcome to India, first of all.
Thank you.
And we're going to get into some Indian flavors very shortly. But before we do, you've been here over the years with several brands. Now, when you set up Nothing, and with this upcoming launch, the Phone 2, what does it feel like being here in India?
It feels great. I was thinking the other day that it almost feels like another home. You know, the first time I visited, it was such a foreign place, but I've come here so much over the years. I actually, when we first set up the previous company here, I lived in Bangalore for a month.
Really?
So I've been here so much that it almost feels like home. I know what to order in the restaurants. I know which restaurants to go to, which hotels to stay at. Feels good.
All right, so we brought you to a particular hotel because we believe in Atithi Devo Bhava in India, and we value our guests. And the best way to value your guests is to get you a good meal. So we're going to get you one of the best meals here in capital city, New Delhi. You're going to tell us about your India visit, what's happening with Nothing Phone 2, how you're building on an ecosystem, and also talk about your journey because you have quite a fan base here in India. Carl is quite the rock star amongst us tech enthusiasts and lifestyle brands as well. He's got a fashion statement that he's going to talk about very shortly with us. But Carl, tell me one quick thing before we enter our lunch meal. And this is a very important question. The question happens to be, do you like Indian food?
I love it.
Awesome. We're going to get inside and continue this conversation on Tech Today.
Let's go.
After you. All right, Carl, I told you, just like the Nothing Phone 2 launch, we want to make this big. So this is our welcome to you in India. We're here, of course, at the iconic Bukhara restaurant in ITC in New Delhi. And I thought we'll get a quick bite. This is a little elaborate, isn't it?
I don't know where to start.
So what we'll do is, let's continue eating and talking a little bit about the first thing that we mentioned at the start of the show, which is about innovation, especially in the smartphone consumer tech world. Do you really think it has stalled? And when you see all these foldables and whatnot coming up, do you still think that this is incremental innovation and not monumental?
I definitely think so. I mean, when I was younger, I used to stay up to watch the keynotes from all the tech companies. Like every generation felt so much better than the previous one. Like the steps were not incremental, they were almost exponential. And it wasn't just the hardware, it wasn't just smartphones, it was the iPod, it was the iPad, the tablets came out. But also on the consumer internet and software side, all of a sudden we had a lot of like new social apps to use. And it was also the time of the App Store revolution. So a lot of apps you could download and try every day. So it just felt like at that moment in time, 10, 15 years ago, that things were just improving really quickly. And then in the last couple of years, say 5 years or so, it's gotten very incremental. Every year, let's make the camera slightly better, a little bit bigger, battery a little bit better, tweak the icons a little bit. Sure, there's a foldables thing now, but I think ultimately it's a bit in the news. But ultimately, it's going to be a very niche product. It's good that some people are building it, but if you look at how the foldables are evolving, they're all the same again.
That's true.
All the foldables look very similar. If you don't see the logo anymore, you hide the logo on the foldables, I don't think a consumer can really tell them apart.
So it's safe to say that Nothing isn't launching a foldable anytime soon?
Not anytime soon. I don't think it's like, I don't think consumers walk around saying, hey, I wish my phone could fold. I think it's an innovation that the manufacturers are pushing onto the consumer.
It's interesting you mentioned that you stayed up for so many keynotes. I still do that because
You still do that?
I have to do that. Unfortunately, I run a tech show and a team that's very enthusiastic about it, but we're also very excited about your keynote that's coming up with the Phone 2. And coming to the Phone 2, Carl, when you launched the Phone 1, it was a mixed bag of reviews. Now you have the Phone 2 coming. We have a few details about it. Well, some of us have been using it as well, but I can't reveal too much. What I can say is Snapdragon 8 Gen 1, a good battery, and there's a huge focus on the cameras. You said, well, cameras are getting slightly better, but when we compare it to the Phone 1, I think there is a monumental change. But I want to understand the rationale for you to go with the Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 chip instead of the Gen 2, because you're a marketing genius, but in consumer tech, everyone says flagship, top of the line, top dollar with the flagship chips. You've taken a conscious decision. Why so?
I think this might get a little bit philosophical, but I think as a tech company, what are you actually here for? I think you gotta either enable consumers or users to do what they couldn't do before, or you enable them to do it faster than before, or more cheap than before. Like, you just really got to push things forward as a tech company. But I think a lot of companies that make smartphones, they're just buying all the components from the supply chain around them and then integrating them. What's the value that they're creating? If they don't have a unique point of view on where to take technology and just buy the latest components, that's not a real business. I don't think it's a real company. So for us, it's about picking the right type of ingredients to make the overall package really good. You might say that we don't have the latest, highest spec processor. We still have a really capable one in the 8 Gen 1 Plus from Snapdragon. Just like when we cook a meal, we don't throw all the ingredients onto the table or into the pot. We pick the best combination of stuff. So, you know, on the Phone 1, we used a 7 series processor, like even lower spec processor. It was really controversial at that time. How can you launch a new phone? The processor is old, it's not the 8 series. But actually, we made it perform better than a lot of phones with the 8 series because it's not just about the hardware. A lot of it is about the tuning of the software and how you really make use of the hardware. So I think people got to look at the whole picture and not just at one spec.
Make tech fun again. Now that's something that's germane to all of us on Tech Today. When we launched this show, we said that there's so much clutter even in the tech content space over here. And to really be iconoclastic, what we want to do is make tech content credible again. Now, that was our plank. I like the fact that, did you take that from me, Carl?
I don't believe so.
I'm messing with you. But making tech fun again, that's something we've been waiting for while you do savor the dal as well. And the dal makhani is quite an iconic dish, something we wait for days to have when we're at home.
Oh,
so
really?
It's good to welcome you with
Let's
that.
try it.
But what I was trying to say, Carl, is that making tech fun again, has that been an incredible challenge for you, especially you were obviously working at OnePlus. You made it perhaps one of the most aspirational rivals to Apple, and in terms of what they've done with an iPhone. You build a community, you build that trust, you walk away one day, you head to London, you have investors all across Europe, and then you set up nothing. Was that honestly a challenge, given the fact that you did this, one, in the pandemic, two, with a lot of baggage from the amazing work you've done from before, but here it could obviously affect you differently. And then the fact that you need to innovate in a space where suppliers, investors, no one really sees light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack here, but I think I've done a bit in my past life, but it got to a point where I couldn't fully realize the ideas that I had, so I had to do something on my own. So there was a lot of pressure in the beginning. You know, when we got the first investors to wire us the money, it felt like a huge burden. Oh, now we're responsible for somebody else's money. What if we mess it up? I remember my parents wanted to invest, and I told them, no, you can't, because I already feel so much pressure from everybody else investing. I don't want to have the opportunity to disappoint my family. So also when people started joining us, it was really an immense pressure, because now their careers were in our hands. If we mess it up, then we kind of make their careers a little bit worse. So a lot of pressure in the beginning, but I think over time, as we've built the company, launched our products, sold a lot of units, things are getting a bit better. We're getting the hang of things, but making tech fun again is very hard in the tech industry, because if you look around, there's not a lot of unique technology. Everybody is just integrating already existing technology onto the products. I think to really make tech fun again, we need to invent something new. We need to invent new technologies and new ways of interacting with the product. If you look at Apple, they started off as a computer company, but it was the iPod that really made them a mass consumer brand. So I think we're still a very young company, so we need to pick our battles. There's only so much we can do, but when the right time comes, we really need to invent something different and new.
You know what's interesting about making tech fun again is, and I have to allude to this, the incredible community you built at OnePlus. I myself was a OnePlus user for the longest time, all right? Full disclosure. But over time, Oxygen OS was the closest to stock Android experience that we expected. On our shows, we spoke about it so much. But ever since you left, somehow it's gone the Oppo way, is what a lot of community members think, right? It's a lot more like Color OS, and some of the things that worked for it earlier aren't necessarily working for it now. When you look at Nothing OS, it's a very fresh take on what Android can be, on what an operating system can be. Is that something, firstly, I want to understand what your thoughts are on how Oxygen OS has evolved ever since you moved on to bigger things, and then how you view Nothing OS in light of that change.
I haven't been paying a lot of attention to Oxygen OS, but from the comments I read online, people are more or less happy with it. So I'm sure there's consumers that like what they're doing. For us, I think we need to take what's good, and I think what's really good is a focus on the foundations of OS, like the animations to make it really smooth, the performance, the battery life. There's a lot of smart things going on in the background when you're not using your phone to optimize it and to make it easier to use, to make it faster, more smooth. I think that we got to keep. We call it fast and smooth, right? We've got to keep that part. But I think we need to introduce more innovation and more new ideas. And when we do that, not everything is going to work immediately, but we got to keep trying. So for us, we believe that the mobile OS hasn't really advanced since the App Store. App Store came out in 2008. Before the App Store, when you bought a phone, you just had X amount of features. After the App Store, you bought a phone, you had infinite features because you just download new apps for different use cases, and there'll be new apps uploaded all the time. So it allowed you to kind of expand your usage indefinitely. But I think what happened after that was all the smart people, they went to making apps. And the apps try to make you stay as long as possible inside of them so they can make more money off of you. So we get really addicted to our phones today, like when we're scrolling our social media. You know, for me, sometimes I just I need to do something with work on my phone. So I unlock my phone, but first I just got to check my Instagram. And then after scrolling a bit, I forgot what I was going to do.
Yeah.
And I talk to friends, and they're kind of similar.
That's true.
And our feeds are all kind of algorithmic. So if we have similar interests, we kind of see the same stuff on social media. So I think it's making us kind of dumb. So the idea we have, beyond just fast and smooth and the basics, is how do we take some of that control that the app developers have wrangled into their hands and give it back to the consumer.
And I think the glyph interface plays a key part with that as well in terms of not being distracted all the time.
Yeah, so the glyph interface is one example. Put your phone down, but still have control of what's important. You can set people that are important to you. You can set apps that are important to you. Some apps, if they have a progress bar, like Zomato or Uber, you can see where it is without checking your phone. So that's one feature that enables you to be more intentional about your smartphone use. But we have more software features as well in the OS on the front.
It's interesting. You mentioned two startups which are doing well here in India, and you seem very glued into the India story. And there's a big India element when it comes to the Nothing phone too as well, with manufacturing happening in the southern parts of India. What are your views on India and how have they evolved, Carl? Because you've been visiting for a while with other brands as well. You built a community for another brand. Now you're building it over here in India. One, in terms of the importance of building a community in a country like India, where people are very price conscious, very discerning. And two, also, how has the Indian consumer really evolved over the past decade, perhaps?
I think first it was more about just tapping into this market and selling products, and then came the local manufacturing part. And I think the next stage will be, how can we make this a hub for the entire world for exporting products? I think that's the transition that the our entire industry is going through in India. As for the consumers, I think they've always been very demanding. It's like some of the most vocal consumers online on social media, and I don't think that's changed.
Yeah.
But the competition is a lot higher. So when we launched OnePlus before, we had good value for money, good spec, good price.
Yeah.
It was quite unique back then. But today, there's many options if that's all you're looking for. So with Nothing, we're trying to do something a little bit different, trying to have a more clear idea of where we want to take the industry and be more unique in our approach to our products and our software. I think overall yeah, I think the India market will be really important because we're seeing right now the macroeconomics are not good globally.
Globally.
Yeah, but still in India, we don't feel a recession. The economy is still growing, and there's a lot of youth population, very tech savvy. So we see it as one of our most important strategic markets. We see Apple also coming in quite aggressively, so we can't be too slow. We got to hurry up our plans here as well, so we have a chance of taking some market share before Apple gets too dominant.
Carl, another thing that I really want to understand is when we talk about the origin stories, we're having a nice meal from a part of the country that I come from, and I enjoy this food. For you, it's been an interesting story, right? Growing up in Sweden, then obviously working at several tech companies across Asia. Now, how much of that really weighed in? And now we can get philosophical and emotional while you enjoy some food. How much of that really weighed in when you quit OnePlus and everyone was trying to figure out what's Carl's next move? And, especially when you must have gone back, I'm guessing, there's a lot of Swedish connection there with Nothing, with investors and stuff like that. How much of it was, hey, let's go back home and figure out my next move and then announce it to the world?
It might have looked very intentional how everything unfolded, but it was actually quite organic. I thought that because I was working so hard on the previous company, that I wanted to take half a year off to travel the world, because I never really got the opportunity to take an extended vacation. So I went on a trip, went to south of Greece, south of Italy, and then about 10 days into the trip, I was like, this is actually really boring. Like luxury hotels, luxury meals, great wine, champagne, but it's very repetitive.
Yeah.
Great weather, great pools, and I felt like, my youth was being just burned away. So I had this guilt feeling that I had to get back to work.
Yeah.
So I went back to Sweden. I had never raised money before, so I was like, where do we start? And I remembered that, there's a lot of entrepreneurs in Sweden.
Right.
A lot of the big tech companies are Swedish, actually,
Yeah.
including Spotify, etc. So I started talking to my old contacts in Sweden, and one person introduced me to the next person. And in about 2 weeks, I had spoken to all the entrepreneurs in Sweden about how they raise money. So everybody had a slightly different approach, but they were all very helpful in helping me shape my strategy and making introductions to investors or even chipping in themselves. So that's kind of how it started. And so there's a very strong connect to Sweden in that sense.
Yeah.
But because I spent the last 11 years in Shenzhen, and Shenzhen I found is very good at hardware.
Right.
Hardware engineering, hardware manufacturing. So we built our hardware team there. And then, because I spent some time in Europe, so what Shenzhen doesn't have, I think, is the creativity. If you want to create things that are different, if you want to have new and more visionary ideas, it doesn't really come from that part of the world.
Yeah.
That's why we headquartered ourselves in London, so we can tap into all the creative talent in that region. So our design, our product design, our marketing, our branding, our finance is all based out of there.
You didn't think the US was a better option to set up Nothing than London, given the West Coast and the tech prowess over there?
I think there's a lot of US tech companies that are great, but Europe doesn't really have any. So it might have been easier for us to build a team in London. Like if you're somebody in the UK or in Europe and you want to be a part of a legendary product company, what options do you have? Whereas in the US, you have like a handful of options. So I thought from a talent perspective, it would be easier out of Europe. And I have a European kind of background. It's closer to my family, so that's why we chose London.
Fair enough, Carl. Also, when we talk about we're charting out the global map out there, and I hope you're enjoying the meal. Did you like the paneer?
It's good.
Yeah, awesome, great. I'm going to get that next then because it's recommended by Carl Pei. But Carl, when you're talking about the global map, and then India, like you said, is a key market for you. With the Nothing Phone 1, we obviously had a product made for India. The gap that was left by a lot of legacy brands perhaps could have been filled by the Nothing Phone 1. Now the Phone 2, it's a different approach. It's a little more premium, and the US market opens up as well. 750,000 devices sold for the Nothing Phone 1, something like that, maybe a little more, if you can correct me if I'm wrong. With the US market opening up with Phone 2, with you just globe-trotting and figuring out how exactly you're going to strategize this, how do you see sales for the Nothing Phone 2? I mean, I want to really prod you on for numbers, but what is your target like when you go back home and you head to bed?
I think, so if you look at the economy again, the economy is not very good. So in this environment, it's better to optimize for the bottom line than the top line. So we're still going to grow on the top line, but the profitability becomes a lot more important because if you look at all the tech stocks, they've taken a beating in this environment. So if we can sell similar amount of Phone 2 to the Phone 1, but given that the price has increased, it's a much more premium product, we're going to be happy with that. But it all depends on, you know, when people get the product into their hands, whether they like the product or not. And if they love the product, even if the Phone 2 doesn't do tens of millions, I think it sets our brand up really well for the next one and the next one and the next one.
Right. And when we're talking about Nothing, I thought we've spoken about literally everything about Nothing, but I want to make this fun as well. So what I am going to do is make you bust a few myths. In a previous life, I was a lawyer, so I'm going to put you on the stand there. You can bust a few myths. Some of them will just be fictitious, figments of my imagination, but it'll be nice to see you bust them as well.
Let's try.
The Nothing glyph interface is more of a gimmick than a game changer.
I think it's a fair comment from some people following the launch of the Phone 1. We have a lot of great ideas in our roadmap, and with the Phone 2 launch, we're going to see a lot of functionality coming out on the glyph interface. And we're also opening up the SDK and the API to developers, so there will be a lot more fun stuff coming. So I hope our community over here in India can also engage and build great experiences on top of that. But I agree, at the launch of the Phone 1, it wasn't that functional. We had ideas, but we just didn't have enough time to get them out there.
It grows on you. I've been experimenting with the Phone 2, and it genuinely grows on you. And with some of the functionalities, I'm slowly becoming a fan, Carl. So I appreciate that. If Carl Pei was not a tech founder and the creative wizard that you are, what would you be doing?
I wanted to create my own mezcal brand. You know, this Mexican
like
alcohol, similar to tequila. Because I saw a gap in the market where, first of all, I like the product, but there was no real premium brand. Like, if you want to create tequila, there's so many brands to choose from. But mezcal is still very unorganized. That was one idea. Another idea was to kind of open a hostel, youth hostel, in somewhere really picturesque, close to a mountain somewhere. Make it really affordable, but really hard to get a reservation because the experience is so good.
I was in Mammoth a couple of weeks ago, mountain town, picturesque, and a mezcal bar. I'm just saying, someone's already gotten that idea, Carl. We got to start working on it very soon. If Nothing didn't exist, and you were still on your sort of sojourn or your break in Greece, and having a nice chill time for these 3 years for some reason, what device would you, which ecosystem would you opt for, Apple or Samsung? Or a third one?
Probably Apple.
Okay.
Yeah, I've been an Apple fan for the longest time, and I think especially the early days of Apple, they put so much love into the product. The moment I fell in love with Apple was when I had the first generation iPad. And I don't know if you remember, but you can swipe up and get this menu for settings.
Of course,
And one of the knobs was the volume rocker, and it was still skeuomorphic, so it kind of looked like real metal, right? Like brushed metal. And when you tilted the iPad, the light reflection of the metal knob changed as you tilted the iPad. I was like, whoa, they care about all the details, even like a tiny detail like this. So that's what made me fall in love. I think they put a lot of love into their products. I think recently they become a bit lazy because they have a ecosystem lock-in, right? You already use the MacBook, the iPhone, the Apple Watch, the iCloud, the AirDrop, the iMessage, whatnot, and that locks the consumers in, so they don't have to work as hard on the product innovation anymore. So I think that's something that we need to address over time, so that everybody can go back to innovate on the product again.
Okay, this is a social media myth, but I'd love to get your take on it. Whenever someone introduces Carl Pei, there's often, well, a murmur of Steve Jobs. Is Carl Pei inspired by Steve Jobs? Is he one of your role models? And how do you really deal with something, you know, when someone speaks speaks of both of your names in the same breath?
I feel it's quite flattering, but also we're not there yet. Like, we're so small as a company, and we're so unsuccessful compared to where Apple is. So I don't know if it's a good comparison. And I also believe that everybody's different. Like, when you meet, I met a lot of my heroes during my journey, and at the end of the day, what I found out is that everybody's just a normal person. It might be a myth looking at somebody from the lens of the media or from a book or biography, but at the end of the day, we're just normal people, and we shouldn't idolize anybody.
Carl Pei doesn't smile.
I can smile.
There you go. He smiles at the cameras as well. No, I'm just so glad, Carl, that we've been able to do this. It's been a fascinating conversation.
It's been fun.
It's been so much fun. You've been candid. We've sort of enjoyed our meals, but we've left that for now. So what we should do is perhaps enjoy this meal before you move on to your next meeting. And
Sounds
thank
good.
you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
On Tech Today. Cheers, man.